Alright, so this next person that's coming up is a person that's really dear to my heart. He has like led me in my faith. He is there when I need him the most. I can call him any time of the day. He might answer the phone, but I'd rather just FaceTime and just sit there and talk to him. But this guy is active in our community. He's active in our high schools. He's active in our college lives. And he just loves on us so much. And he's with an organization called Young Life, which is something that I really love, really care for because of the ministry behind it and how we love the kids through that thing. And so if it wasn't for Brock, we wouldn't be doing this. So now welcome up to the stage, Brock Glenn.
I'm mic'd up. I'm good. Thank you, Jordan. Hey, thank you guys for having me out to talk today. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and never could I have dreamt that I would actually be in front of you here at this place. And I'll get into this in a little bit, but a little bit about my story as I'm from here. But my time with MCC goes way back. I've had cousins that have gone to school here, played basketball here, soccer here. My brother actually played basketball here. And so just growing up, I've been to the games at the City Center and everywhere. So it's been cool to see MCC grow and expand and just continue to reach more and more people. And so I'm very thankful for this place and what you guys do here. And so anyways, today I just wanted to share a little bit with you about my story. And before I get into that, let me ask a question. How many of you guys have somebody in your life that you look up to that serves as kind of like as a mentor or a spiritual figure that you just admire in your life that's personally impacted you? By a show of hands, how many of you guys have somebody like that? Awesome. So almost everybody in the room, which is not surprising and is a pretty cool thing. But when Ben asked me to speak today, I was just trying to think about something that I wanted to share with you guys that you could take away with you that would not only encourage you, but hopefully challenge you as well to go from this place as soon as you leave these doors, and that you can take with you, and it's super practical. And so that's what I wanted to come up with, and that's what hopefully I'm going to be sharing with you today, and that includes a little bit of my story. But before we do that, let me pray for this time. Dear Father, just thank you for this time. Thank you for this place. You're such a big and great God, Father. Thank you for the grace that you show us. And just today, may you bless my words, Father. May you speak through me. And give me words, Father, that would just lift up this group that's here today, and that would encourage them and draw them closer to you, Father. Again, we thank you for this time. And it's in your holy and precious Son's name we pray. Amen. Awesome. So, a little bit about me. And Ben's going to put a picture up here. This is my family, and this is me growing up. I'm the oldest of four, and that's Derek, my youngest brother on the right, Justin in the middle wearing the 42, Whitney, my sister, and then my dad, Randy, and my mom, Denise. And so that's us growing up, and I just grew up just outside of town here. Went to Riley County High School, if you're familiar with it. And so I've had the pleasure of being around this neighborhood in this town for a long time. And so, but growing up, as you can see, granted I was young here, but I was always one of the shorter and smaller ones in my class. And so for me, that's how I identified a lot. And at freshman year of high school, just to give you a picture, I was 4'11" and 90 pounds when I started high school. And so super itty bitty, and I caught up eventually, thankfully. But regardless, that's kind of how I grew up. I was always the shortest and smallest one. And so a lot of times, that made me feel small and forgotten. And so I really tried to excel in sports, but as you get into middle school and high school, being that short, it kind of hinders you, and you're kind of viewed not as significantly as you might be if you were 6 foot and 180 pounds. And so, as a purebred athlete, and that wasn't me. And so anyways, and so that was a big part of my life, and so I just always felt like I was trying to make up and trying to prove myself and seek approval. And it was interesting because about the same time period, in 6th grade, a guy by the name of Matt Shepard entered my life. And this is Matt. This is actually me in college. As you can believe, that goatee's hideous, I apologize. But that's Matt Shepard. And he was a college student at K-State at the time when I was in 6th grade, and he was a junior in college, and he had met the Lord when he was at a community college and came back to K-State and just really felt like he wanted to do ministry, he wanted to do life with people. And somehow he got connected to my parents and a couple of my friends' parents, and so needless to say, he ended up starting hanging out with 6 of us guys. And so what that looked like, there was some fun times. And so one of those stories is, and I shouldn't be telling you this because I'm giving you guys ideas that I probably shouldn't, but for honesty's sake, I'll share these stories. But Matt, so one of these stories is Matt actually came and picked us up one time, me and 5 of my friends, and little beknownst to us, when he came and picked us up, he had already printed out a sign, and on that sign, piece of paper, it said, "Please yell into microphone, speaker malfunctioning." And we were like, what are we going to do with this? Like, what's going on? And so we proceeded to drive to McDonald's. And when we got to the drive-thru, he tells my friend Kyle to place that sign on the speaker of the drive-thru. So we placed that sign on the speaker of the drive-thru, and then we proceed to place our order. We go around, get our food, and then park off to the side where we can see in the window, but yet see the drive-thru at the same time. And so as you can imagine, a group of 6 boys and a college student sitting there eating Big Macs in the car and French fries and just watching the chaos unfold was pretty entertaining. And so we proceeded to watch cars drive up, and people began yelling at the top of their lungs to the point where we were probably 20 yards away and could still hear their orders from that distance, let alone the guy inside with the microphone and the headset who kept ripping his headset off and getting more and more visibly angry after each order was being yelled into the microphone. And so for us, it was a blast. We had a joy just watching all this unfold. And these were some of the things that we got to do with Matt, and it was super fun. But the other part of that story is during this time, from 6th grade year to sophomore year in high school, Matt continued to hang out with us guys, and he would take us to football games. We would road trip it to our high school football games. We would go to away basketball games. We'd all pile in a van and go. We'd go out to the lake and hang out. We'd just do all sorts of fun stuff with Matt. But also, within those times, we actually started to begin to wonder, me and my friends, why this guy named Matt was hanging out with us. Like, he seemed to be a pretty legitimate college student, like not weird. He had college friends, so it's not like he didn't have any friends and he just chose 6th graders. And so he actually had a life outside of that. And so it was interesting to see, why would this cool guy named Matt want to hang out with us, awkward, silly-looking 6th grade boys going through middle school and high school. And so we began to ask him questions and say, why are you hanging out with us? Why are you doing this? And that's when he began to unpack and unfold the story before us about this guy named Jesus, and why he wanted to love us is because Jesus loved him. And so I just thought it was interesting as Matt was telling us all these crazy things to do, like placing the signs on speakers and stuff. Here he is, at the same time, sharing us about this guy named Jesus. And throughout this time, he began to earn trust with us by hanging out with us. And as we began to hear about Jesus, we began to trust that and learn more and more and more about this guy named Jesus. And it's similar to a story in Scripture that I wanted to share with you guys. And this is a story that you've probably heard many a time. But until recently, I never really thought about it in this light. And this is why I wanted to share it with you. But it comes from Mark. And it's the story about Jesus feeding the 5,000. And I'm going to skip a little bit ahead in this story. But to give you a little bit of background leading up to this, the disciples have been walking with Jesus for some time now, okay? And Jesus has been performing all these miracles. He's been healing the blind. He's been allowing the paralyzed to walk again. He's been bringing people back from the dead. And so the disciples have walked with them throughout this whole time, seeing all these things happen. As you can imagine, would just be mind-blowing, and try to comprehend that would be unfathomable. But regardless, this is what they have seen. And so you would think at this point that Jesus had earned the trust with these disciples and been like, oh, okay, like I get it. I can trust this guy. Whatever he says, I'm going to do regardless because he knows what he's talking about. Yet, we get to this story. And so let me read in Mark chapter 6, starting verse 35. It says, by this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" Jesus says, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. And so just to stop right there and just paint this picture, here the disciples are again seeing all these miracles and should have believed, trusting anything that Jesus says. They don't. And they begin to question. They're like, "You're crazy, man. Like, why in the world would we go? Like, that's a lot of money, number one. And number two, how in the world do we get that much food to feed them? And if they have it themselves, why don't they just eat it themselves and not have to worry about going and splitting it or dividing it or whatever and so forth?" And so yet, Jesus tells them to go and see. And so they go and get the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And then it says Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided their 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. And so here you can see in the story, the disciples, again, should have never doubted Jesus and his word. But yet they did, no matter what they saw before. And yet Jesus, when they act, performs a miracle and he divides it for all the people to eat. And then on top of that, there's even more left over. And as you can imagine, the disciples are probably sitting there amazed and astounded, like, what in the world just happened? How did this happen? And so it was interesting in my own life, when Matt came into our lives, like I said, with 5 of my friends, so there's 6 of us total, he just started coming to our lunches and hanging out. We do fun stuff and invite people into that. We started having concerts and inviting people to that, have different hangout things, and then we started meeting on Thursday morning before school at his mom's house on the way to our high school. And so we'd stop there and have Bible study, and then we'd proceed on to school in the morning. And so we began to learn about this Jesus guy, and as we learned more about him, we wanted to share that with others. And so we did. And so we started following his lead. Other leaders started coming into the picture. They started riding with him up to our school for lunches. And soon, before you know it, our sophomore year rolls around. And it wasn't just me and my 5 friends still at this point. We held an event out at Riley County High School where there was almost the entire high school. And yes, it was a small high school, so there's only 200 people. But it was still 200 people. And so that was the size of my high school. And so the whole high school was out at this field having fun together and getting to hear the gospel as told by Matt at the end of our sophomore year. And so it's just incredible to see the impact that he had on not only our lives, the 6 of us guys that he started with, but all of these people that he came in interaction with just through building a relationship with us and earning the trust and earning the right to speak into our lives. And at that point, we craved it and we wanted to do more. And so from that point on, Matt actually got married, he moved, went to be the area director for Young Life in Wichita, which is the picture that you saw of me and Matt at the zoo there in Wichita when I went to visit him. But fast forward a little bit to my sophomore year of college, and I still at this time had this picture, this idea that I needed to basically reach this level at which I could then teach and preach the gospel. And I was curious and fascinated by that concept, but I didn't feel like I had quite reached that level yet. And so I asked Matt, I said, "Matt, hey, just curious, if I wanted to do full-time ministry, what would that look like?" And he told me this, and this is one of the most profound things I think I heard in my life at that time. And he told me, he said, "Go do anything else in the world, and when you feel called to ministry, then we can talk." And I was like, that's fascinating. Like, the guy in ministry is telling me to go do anything else but ministry until I feel called. And I was like, okay, so what's the call look like? Like, how do I get this call? Like, does God call me? Do you call me? Like, who calls me? And so really confused at this point. And he said, "You'll know when you feel the call." And I was like, okay. And so I wrote it off and I was like, sweet, I'm gonna go make lots of money. This is gonna be awesome. And so I proceeded to go through college, got my degree, got a master's degree, worked in higher education, and then it wasn't until I was on a run around a lake in Nebraska one day for work that I got that call. And I was so frustrated at life at this point. Nothing necessarily as bad was happening, but it just felt like something was missing. And so at that point, that's when I just yelled out to God and said, tell me what you want me to do. I don't know what that is, but I just want to do it. And it was, me and Matt had maintained touch over the years. We talked maybe once or twice a year, that type of thing, but nothing consistent. And so it was very ironic and obviously a blessing. 20 minutes after I yelled at God and said that prayer, Matt called me and said, what do you think about doing ministry and doing Young Life here in Wichita with me? And I was like, do you realize that 10 years ago you told me to go do anything else? And then when I heard the call, then we could talk, and you're the one calling me again. And so it's just cool to see how the Lord worked through that relationship. But from that point on, I entered and I came on staff with Young Life, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And God has me right where He wants me. But it's been really cool to see that the stuff that I learned growing up from 6th grade year to sophomore year in high school, I now get to put into practice myself. Not putting signs on speakers or anything, but at the same time, building relationships with kids right where they're at, earning the right to be heard, and getting to speak truth in their life. And that's why, rather than me continue to share stories about that, I wanted to bring up my friend Blake Bontrager. Blake, and this is Blake, and I'll let him share a little bit of a story of how we met, but I thought it'd be better for you to hear from him our story and how we got to meet. Give it up for Blake, guys.
It's a solid photo. Yeah, I'm Blake Bontrager. I'm a sophomore over at Kansas State, and I'm from Wichita, like Brock said. But I can remember the first time meeting Brock, and I was a 5'2", 8th grader who was insanely chubby and insanely awkward and very addicted to Sour Patch Kids. And I was going to this thing called Young Life Camp, and I didn't really know anyone, and I don't think really anyone knew me. But my parents made me go to Young Life Camp and got my iPod Touch, and I was going. So I remember my mom waking me up at literally the crack of dawn to go to camp, and she drops me off out of the car, and I don't know anyone. And Brock's, Blake, who is this 30-year-old man yelling my name at 4 a.m.? And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to camp with this dude. And so camp was awesome. Had a lot of really cool memories, a lot of really fun friendships that I made. But I think the coolest thing about camp is that as Young Life kids, we come back from camp, and that's when doing life actually kind of happens. And so I remember if going to camp with Brock was that fun and that awesome. Like I'm very excited to just do life with Brock. And so what that kind of looked like was Brock and I would just hang out and do life, and then he would come to all the high school basketball games and high school football games, and then sit in the student section, which was also kind of weird but kind of fun. And after those games, we'd go to Sonic, and then we even took trips to Dallas and Nebraska, and then it was just an awesome time getting to do life with Brock. And so through that, I just kind of saw what loving someone for themselves looked like as a time when I was a 8th grader in high school. I was kind of confused on what true friendship looked like, and Brock wasn't expecting anything from me. He just wanted to love me where I was at, and he did not expect anything in return, which was so cool. And I just think truly pours out what loving people like Jesus love people looks like. And so coming to K-State as a freshman, I kind of just got involved with other student ministries besides Young Life. But this summer, I kind of felt the call to come back to Young Life and to kind of get involved and kind of look into what being a leader looks like, just like Brock was a leader for me in my high school. So it's been awesome. And just yesterday, me and Jordan went to the high school yesterday, and we had lunch with high schoolers and talked about football practice and broken arms, and it was just cool just to do life with them and love them where they were at. And so through this whole process, it's just been crazy to see how God was working in Brock's life and Matt Shepard's life to eventually work into my life, and just truly try to reflect Jesus' love onto these kids. But yeah, but welcome back up, Brock.
Hey, Hey, and again, I thank you guys for letting me and Blake come up here and speak, but my hope is through this little message that you guys have heard, and this is my encouragement / challenge to you guys. The disciples got to know Jesus, and that Jesus earned the right with the disciples by just doing life with them. And at the same time, Matt earned the right by doing life with me, and I've earned the right with Blake by doing life with him, and he's now doing the same. And for my encouragement to you guys is to know, as you leave this room, as you leave these doors today, you guys possess that same power. You guys are each capable of doing ministry on such a level that you couldn't even fathom or imagine. Just like the disciples were amazed at how many people were fed, you would be surprised at how many people you guys can reach just by being intentional and doing life with people. And at the same time, there has been somebody in your life that's done that with you, and that's why you're probably sitting in this room. And so in that same light, be thinking as you leave this place, who is that person on your heart that you're like, man, I really want to pursue that person. I want to do life with them and just love them right where they're at. And hopefully, maybe, they'll get to know who this Jesus guy is as well through that relationship. And that's why I want to read this verse to you and leave you with this. But it comes from 1 Timothy 4, and it's verse 12. And it says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And so as you guys leave, just because you feel like you're not ready yet and you're not at that place, like the Lord wants to do something special through you, and he already is. It's just up for us to answer that call. And we might think it's crazy, but if we can do it, if we can step outside of our comfort zone and do that, he's going to do great things through you guys, and I know that's true. And so thank you guys again for letting me come up here and speak and share with you. And hopefully today, you're just drawn a little bit closer to him. So thank you.
idea that we can do it by ourselves. We are in control of all of this, but in the reality is that we need to depend on God, and He's the one that's in control. And so there's an opportunity coming up where we can practice this, or we can deny ourselves something so we can take up dependency on God. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have a fast. And so next week after chapel, there'll be an informational meeting on this. But it says in Scripture that this idea of fasting is turning back to God. And that's not something we have to wait for a fast to do. We can start putting that into practice now and praying and preparing our hearts for the fast. So if you have any questions beforehand, you can reach out to anyone on SSLC. And we're really looking forward to this chance to just come together in community and remind ourselves what it looks like to depend on God. So we're looking forward to it.
As you go today, go in peace, and love the Lord with everything you are, and serve Him with everything you have. You're dismissed.